All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast Day. Me and Rowdy are going to be looking at the Big 12 championship game with heavy playoff implications. Top 10 Baylor team will play Oklahoma State, who is fifth right after the rankings come out. They're playing for a playoff spot. Rowdy, do you think the Cowboys can potentially jump Cincinnati with a big, impressive performance on Saturday?
Uh, I think they can. Considering Cincinnati, they're not going to play a top 10 opponent like OK State is. I would still like to see Cincy and OSU both end up in the playoff. That's my personal opinion, but I do think that if OSU can get a win here in Baylor, then I think they'll jump Cincinnati and get in the playoff.
Yeah, the Cowboys are 5.5-point favorites. 46.5 is the over/under. This one will be noon Eastern time at AT&T Stadium. Looking at this Baylor offense from Gerry Bohannon, he might not play. He had that hamstring against Texas Tech. I don't know if you've seen Blake Shapen play, Shapen that is, but he's been kind of impressive in that quarterback role. Do you think they can take on this top-tier defense with a freshman quarterback under center?
Yeah, I saw a little bit of him play against Texas Tech, and I thought that he was pretty impressive. He didn't have a bad game at all, and Texas Tech is certainly not. They're not a great team, but they're not terrible. And they were coming off, I think, the pretty tough loss against OSU the week before. I could be mistaken there, but Baylor, Blake Shapen really elevated the offense a little bit, and I think their run game is something to watch for in this matchup with Tristan Ebner and Abram Smith.
Yeah, Shapen, he's pretty speedy for being under 200 pounds. I like what he did against Kansas State as well. He's able to come in. I don't know. I think they scored maybe once with him under center. They didn't score a lot, but he did a good job of not going 3 and out, not rushing things, not turning the ball over. As a dual threat guy, I think they're in good hands with him. But Gerry Bohannon's been very efficient as a passer this year. But yeah, that running game you talked about with Abraham Smith and Ebner, this is the way they're going to make their money all game long. They're averaging about 230 yards per game. A couple weeks ago, they dominated the Sooners in the trenches. Another tough matchup. How do you see Baylor matching up against the Cowboys in the trenches?
I like the matchup because if you look back to the last game, Baylor struggled to run the ball against Oklahoma State. Tristan Ebner had 8 carries for no yards, and Abram Smith, if you take away his 55-yard run, he had 44 yards for 9 carries, 42 yards for 9 carries. So I think that OSU might still have the advantage. They did have a lackluster performance in the trenches against OU last week, but that's OU. I think their offense is it's arguably the best in the Big 12. Baylor did get the upper hand over them a few weeks ago, but I still think OU has arguably the best offense in the Big 12, and the Cowboys struggled with it at times. I don't think that will be the case for Baylor, although I would like to note it really is tough to beat a team the second time around.
Yeah, they started off the year, Baylor, that is, red hot, running the football. They played nobody, though. We wanted to see how they did throughout the course of the year. I'd say they did pretty well, 300 plus against BYU. They're a couple yards away from 300 against Oklahoma. Worst performance of the year, that running the ball, came against this same Pokes team on the road. I think going to a neutral site this time around, 2 months later, it's certainly going to be a big advantage for them. But not just the running game that's important. I think this receiving duo of RJ Sneed and TyQuan Thornton, it's as impressive as they come. What are some things you think they can do to take advantage of this 5-man secondary group the Pokes roll out that's been very good this year?
Well, I think that's actually one of my bigger notes is Baylor has got to take advantage with Blake Shapen. He looks like he can air it out a little bit more than Bohannon. Bohannon's more of a, I would say, run-first type of dual threat quarterback. But I do think Shapen can come in and air it out a little bit on the OSU defense, just as we saw Caleb Williams do. And I think that Tristan Ebner, he's one of the running backs. I do think he will have a nice impact in the receiving game. He had 4 receptions for 118 yards against Texas Tech, and with a 61-yarder. I think he's going to be a guy that OSU is really going to have to key in on, and he could be a guy you dump it down to in the flats, and he gets 5 or 10 yards just because he's that electric. So I think really it's short yardage that they'll have to work for, but they need to beware of the chunk play because OU took advantage of chunk plays against OSU, and I don't think that they'll get away with that this second time around against Baylor if they allow that.
Yeah, Ebner, he's a big asset in special teams as well. He's one of my favorite players in the conference. Baylor as a whole, they're averaging 33 points per game. They got really impressive balance shifting to the Oklahoma State offense, Spencer Rattler, the last time these two played, he had 3 interceptions at home. He was very battle-tested last week in that back-and-forth game with Oklahoma. He had 2 picks, and he probably could have had even 5. Like, he had a lot of bad throws, handful of drops. What can Spencer Rattler do to not throw this game away? Because that's been a big issue for him at times in these bigger games, is not protecting the football.
Yeah, well, first, I think we're talking about the wrong Spencer. You said Rattler. Yeah, I think you mean
Spencer
Sanders a little bit. Yeah, Rattler's been in the news, though, so he's been in the news a little bit more recently, so I understand.
Yeah, he's on my mind. Yeah, you're right. Spencer Sanders, I apologize.
No, you're good, man. I think the biggest thing for Spence is he's got to have a short-term memory. And that is one thing that Coach Gundy and a lot of the other athletes have praised him on in the most recent weeks is if you look at week 1 to 3, he struggled very badly. And if you look from week 4 to now, he has progressed and shown signs of, the leader of the Oklahoma State Cowboys. And I think he needs to get over the last game against Baylor, the 3 interception game. He had a lot of bad throws in that game. I'd argue that was one of his worst games of the year. And I think if he can put that behind him, I see no reason why OSU can't have success. And even against OU with 2 interceptions, I think he's got to shore up the turnovers. That's always been one of his biggest things. But his reactions to the turnovers are what makes it matter. Because if you looked at Spencer in the Baylor game, he didn't get frustrated. He stayed consistent, and he kept his composure. And that's ultimately what led OSU, to the win to fight off Baylor's comeback attempt.
Yeah, that's why I use the word because last week they got him going with his legs. That's when he's at his best. I think he still fits the system they have, that pistol, shotgun look, getting outside of the pocket, throwing the ball or running the ball. That's really where he's at his best. And, he made a big impact, a season high, 93 rushing yards. That's going to be another key in this game. Protecting the ball like we just focused on. You can't turn it over here in this game.
Right.
But I think that's what they're going to do. Try to get him out of the pocket, get him off his base in the pocket. Jaylen Warren, they got to get him going, though. The Utah State transfer has been phenomenal this year. 1,100 yards, double-figure touchdowns. Do you think they're going to look for more of a balanced approach in this one, or do you think they're going to look to run the ball? They were pretty successful in doing the first matchup around.
Oklahoma State, I've seen them live. I'm a student here. I've seen them live a lot. They like to go with the balanced attack, and I think that's what they're going to do here. Jaylen Warren wasn't able to get going against OU. He still had 17 carries, though. I don't see him shying. I see him getting about 15 carries. I'd also like to see Dominic Richardson, backup running back, get involved a little bit more. Desmond Jackson, OSU likes to have a rotational running back core ever since Chuba Hubbard dispersed. And I think that Spencer will also be incorporated in there because, like you said, Sanders had a lot of success with his legs, and it was the most that he has ran this year. And I think if they can get him going, it makes for one more guy to account for in Sanders because he's been a little bit more consistent in the pocket, so he's not taken off as much, which is nice. But I think Spencer still needs to realize that sometimes he does need to take off and get those extra yards. Yeah,
Warren was that workhorse back. He had 30-plus carries in that game. The next week at Texas, he did too. Big focal point of their offense. They ran it almost 60 times as a team, a little north of 200 yards. That's not great, but it was just enough to wear down this Baylor defense. And eventually they had that final drive late in the game that was very long, and that one sealed the deal. Tay Martin, though, he's been really the whole passing game. Brendan Presley's made some good plays here down the stretch, but Martin, he's been very helpful for Spencer Sanders. Are they going to look to key in on him, Baylor, as a defense, or do you think they're just going to try to play it soft against everybody and not try to get beat because Presley's a burner? They also got some freshmen in there who can make plays downfield as well.
I'd honestly say that the Baylor, the OSU secondary has their hands more full than the Baylor secondary does. So, but I do think that Tay Martin is a guy that they're going to they need to bracket. Body guy that has made almost every catch this season he's made, one-handed, behind the back. Guy's a phenomenal athlete. Brendan Presley, like you said, he's got the speed. Had a really nice kickoff return touchdown against OU, changed the dynamic of the game. And I think if they can get Brennan a little bit more involved in open space, I think he can get chunk yardage but I would be more concerned about the Baylor receiving core if we're talking about secondaries in the defense.
Yeah, that's for sure. Martin, he's going to get his receptions regardless. He's kind of undersized. What was it, 190? But
yeah, but at height wise, he's got about 6'3", so he's got the height to get up over guys.
Right, he plays way above his size. Coming over from Washington State, he's caught plenty of footballs in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, you're looking at two very similar offenses in terms of balance. They want to run the ball first. They got some impressive guys in the receiving group. They also have quarterbacks who have progressed. I mean, Gerry Bohannon, not so much, I guess, because he's thrown some picks late in the year. But regardless, I think both teams are very comfortable with what they have on offense coming into this game.
Yeah, they match up pretty well. I've always thought Baylor and OSU play kind of similar this year. They have good scrappy defense. Obviously, I'm going to give OSU the edge in terms of their defense, but they've got a consistent they just play tough. They fight for each other. The offense sputters at times, but their defense can make up for, the lack of offense at times.
Looking at these defenses, these are pretty phenomenal. People have started to respect the Big 12 a little bit more as a defensive conference. Two of these teams lead the charge. Baylor, I like this unit they have. A couple weeks ago, I picked them to beat Oklahoma, but their defense was even better than I thought. They had allowed only 10 points up until that final garbage time drive. Jalen Pitre, this guy is phenomenal. 15.5 tackles for loss. He's a hybrid player for them. He's having a phenomenal year, building off last season's momentum. How big is Pitre to this defense, and what ways are they going to try to use him? Because they can use him in a lot of different ways.
Well, I think he's going to be used a little bit in the box, a little bit more as a safety, and I think that he will try to come down on the pistol sets whenever OSU lines up in the pistol, because there's obviously a lot you can do out of the pistol, but whenever they line up there, they're typically going to give it to their running back, typically downhill, Jaylen Warren, and I think if he can come in and make an impact in the run game, that would set up his opportunities in the passing game.
Yeah, getting their safeties downhill, involved in the running game, I think that really set them up for success. I don't think they're too worried about the downfield passing attack by Oklahoma State. Of course, there are going to be a lot of jump balls to Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, they have 5 seniors in the secondary. Pitre's one of them. He's a hybrid. He'll play at linebacker. He has guys like Christian Morgan, Raleigh Texada. I like this secondary. I know we just talked about it a second ago, but do you think that this secondary is going to have fits all day, or do you think they're going to have overall pretty solid afternoon?
I think it'll vary. I guarantee we'll see. I would imagine of their secondary in the first half. That's what I imagine. I'd see they're going to come out with changes in the second half. OSU starts out pretty nice. They started out good against OU. If I'm not mistaken, they started out okay against Baylor. So I think they're just going to need to make adjustments in the second half. I'm not going to say they're going to get picked on all game, but I do know that it'll fluctuate because the offenses, Gundy's going to make adjustments. Randa's going to make adjustments, and it's going to be a really nice chess match between the two coaches. Yeah,
I like the front seven they have. Dillon, Doyle, Terrell Berard at linebacker. These guys, I think it's a great trio they have whenever Pitre gets down there in the box. Siaki Ika, defensive tackle. This guy is 350 pounds. He kind of reminds me of Vita Villa. This guy is a complete train wreck through the middle. I think controlling the line is going to be very big in this game. The first time they played, Oklahoma State came out with a volume running attack, but I'd say for the most part they did a good job of limiting the big plays. I think Oklahoma State did score in one big play, though. But overall, I think limiting the big plays, controlling the line of scrimmage, that's going to be the key for the Baylor defense.
I agree.
Looking at the Pokes defense, they have yet to allow 24 points in a game. And last week, I guess that's still kind of true. I had a fan in the first half. He was telling me how this Oklahoma State defense really isn't that good because of how they played in the first half. And I said, watch, they're going to give up 10 points or less in the second half, and they shut them out on the defensive side of the ball. They did that against Texas as well, where they didn't give up much in the second half. What's so good about Jim Knowles and the adjustments he makes that makes this defense flourish so much in the second half of games?
Well, if it really is crazy because I kind of wonder that myself. I mean, if you look at the defense, they don't have a lot of super, if you look at their high school ranking, not a lot of them are super talented. I mean, coming into the year, they lost Trace Ford, so they lost their starting edge rusher. They're working with a guy, Brock Martin. He's announced that he's going to come back. They just have a lot of guys that want to get to the football. It doesn't matter if you're a linebacker or an edge. Colin Oliver, he had the game clinching sack against Williams in Bedlam. And guys like that, they're all getting to the quarterback, and their secondary, they play. And I think that's really what Jim Knowles preaches to this defense, and that's it all year long.
Yeah, up on the defensive front, they have, Oliver and Martin, like you said, Tyler Lacy. All these guys have double-figure tackles for loss on the year. I think what's crazy about this defensive front, though, is that you don't know which one of them is going to show up. Every other weekend, one of them's making plays. Some weeks, all three of them are making plays. They really like what they have on their defensive front.
Yeah, and we can't forget about Rodriguez, of course.
Malcolm Rodriguez, that linebacker. Yeah, I was getting to him. He's a phenomenal player. Oklahoma State, their defensive line, though, they lead the nation in sacks as a unit. That's a big-time accomplishment for a Big 12 defense that never seems to get any respect, especially since Mike Gundy's football teams have usually been ran through offense. He's completely flipped the script with the offense kind of falling off since Mason Rudolph left, and they're playing elite defense, like you said, led by Malcolm Rodriguez. He leads this team far and away.
If I'm not mistaken, you think sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. You think Rodriguez was snubbed for Butkus finalist award, right?
Yeah, he wasn't even a finalist looking at what I saw. Yeah.
And there was a lot of guys at the game. When I was at Bedlam, there were a lot of fans. Anytime Malcolm made a play, a lot of them would say Butkus. It wasn't too big of a chant to hear, but a lot of fans in the student section were saying Butkus because, it was Malcolm Rodriguez ended up with 2 sacks in Bedlam and certainly made his name shown in that game. And I agree. I think he was a snub for the Butkus Award.
Yeah, this is his 3rd year as the leading tackler on the team. I think he was 2nd his freshman year. He's been a playmaker since he got to Stillwater. You got Devin Harper right next to him. This 4-2-5 defense, I really like what they do in the back end. They're veterans. They all understand their assignments. They don't give up too many big plays. I think they gave up one big play in the secondary the first time they played Baylor. They kind of had their issues with some of those jump balls against Oklahoma in that first half. Overall, though, who or what impresses you most about this secondary that features 5 guys?
That's tough. I really like Jarek Bernard-Converse. I'd probably say he's arguably my favorite. Kolby Harvell-Peel is a great safety, arguably a guy that's going to come in. I don't think he's going to get a lot of draft stock, but I think that he's a guy that's going to come into any NFL roster and make an impact there, whether it's a special teams guy or a practice squad guy. They just have a lot of guys that I think are late round draft picks and guys that they've all come back. I mean, these guys are team first guys. They play for each other. They come back forget about the draft. We're going to come back. We're going to play for another year. And these are guys that came back last year with the same aspirations. And this year they're finally turning those Big 12 championship and, playoff aspirations into fruition. And so really it's these guys just believe. And that's what I'd say in the secondary is that these guys just know how to make plays.
Yeah, Tanner McAllister at safety. You got Christian Holmes at corner. I like what he does as a tackler on the outside. Only 8 picks on the year. So playmaking isn't ideal from a turnover standpoint, at least in the back end, but that's because their front 7 does a lot of the heavy lifting. The way they disrupt is very impressive because, they're kind of on their heels there in the Oklahoma game. They came out in the second half and incredibly aggressive. They send a lot of blitzes. I believe on that final stop late in the game, they sent a blitz. And those guys got home. They do that so well. Incredibly phenomenal job by Jim Knowles. They've had their hands full at times this season. The only game I've really seen them get burned in the secondary was the Iowa State game. And then, they had some struggles against Oklahoma. For the most part, I thought they played a very good game. Cutting down on the mistakes is something they have to avoid, though. They were giving the game away there at one point. They had a safety, and then they had a muffed punt that was returned for a touchdown. So cutting down the mistakes, that's going to be a big part of this game. See that team show up again, at least in the mistake category. Do you think that's an area of concern heading into Arlington?
I wouldn't say so because I think that Coach Gundy and Casey Dunn, the offensive coordinator, are well aware of that. They're going to make sure that, Brennan Presley on his fumble return, it was pretty close to when he just after he returned the kick for a touchdown. So I think he was getting a little, overconfident there. and it was a weird angle when he was returning it. So I think as long as they just make sure that they're not making the same mistakes that they've made before, I think they'll honestly be fine in the turnover game. But really, it'll boil down to if Spencer Sanders can lead the offense and lead a turnover-free game, because he's the most prone to do one. But I really do think that he'll be locked in against Baylor the second time around.
Yep, before we make our final prediction, one key to the game for me, that's what you just said. Sanders, I think he's ultimately the key to the game. I think they're going to run the ball pretty well like they did the first time around. I don't think they're going to run for 400-plus yards or anything. They'll do a solid job. They'll have their bright spots and their negatives, but they're going to look to run the ball 40 to 60 times. What Sanders does on third downs and what he does, how he fights adversity in this game, I'm sure there's going to be times where he has to. I think that's ultimately going to be the biggest key. What's the biggest key for you? You want to kind of bounce off what I was saying about Sanders? You think there's something more we should talk about for a key to the game?
I also think that's a very big key, but I'm going to shift to Baylor, and I'm going to say they have to make plays behind the line of scrimmage. If OSU is going to want to run the ball, 40 times a game, they're going to need to get about half of those behind the line of scrimmage if they want to make an effect, because they took out Jaylen Warren. OU took out Jaylen Warren a little bit. He did have a touchdown run, but he was really limited, 17 carries, 19 carries for 50 some odd yards. So I think they need to get him going a little bit more. But if Baylor can make plays behind the line of scrimmage, then OSU is going to find themselves in fits, because then that will put Sanders in uncomfortable situations.
All right, so we're going to do our predictions here. I'm going to say what I think is going to happen. I'll give my game pick, and then you'll do the same. Oklahoma State, they lead the nation in third down defense. I'm not sure if Gerry Bohannon is going to play. If he does, he might be a little hobbled. So I'm just going to assume that Shapen's going to get the start. I really like this kid. I think he's really talented, but, he's got to go play this great defense, and probably the biggest start of his young career. It's only his third career game. I think that's going to lead to some issues. Not turnovers-wise. I just don't think they're going to be very efficient. Defense on the lot, and that's eventually going to take a toll, and I think Oklahoma State's going to grind them down a bit, kind of like the first game. I see them winning 27-17, very close to the last game they played. What's your pick, and what do you think is going to happen in this ball game?
Well, I think for starters, I think Jim Knowles is going to get Shapen in a little bit of trouble. I think the defense he'll send some exotic blitzes, some stunts, and I think it will get Shapen in a little bit of trouble, get him out of the they want to try and do better. I think maybe Shapen's athleticism will kind of give them fits, just like Caleb Williams did. I'm not expecting a 40-yard dash down the field, flip field position at all. But I think that little small chunks, 6-7 yards, to just get them in, second and short, third and short positions, will happen throughout the game, and it will keep Baylor's drives going. I think the defense of OSU will get a little worn down at times. But I think ultimately, OSU's been one of the best at bend, don't break this season. Mm-hmm. And I think they're going to do we're going to have another tough finish I'm going to go OSU 33, Baylor 24.
Yeah, even if Bohannon plays, I don't think it's really going to change the script much, because, again, I do think he's going to be hobbled, because that was a pretty brutal-looking hamstring injury when he pulled up on that one a couple weeks ago. So I think over at quarterback, they're going to get roughed up a bit in this one. We're both keen on the Pokes covering the 5.5-point spread. I think this should be a good game overall, though. Remember Baylor a couple years ago, 2 years ago, really. Matt Rule's last season, they were a couple plays away from a playoff bid themselves. So they could potentially, depending on what else goes on in college football, they could themselves be playing for a playoff bid. So I think we'll see a good game here. Anything else you'd like to add before wrapping up?
No, I'll be at Arlington this weekend, and I'm going to be it's going to be fun, man. Looking forward to it, because I was at Bedlam last week. Great atmosphere. And it'll be my first time at Jerry's World, so I'm looking forward to that weekend.
Yep. Last year I picked the Pokes to make the playoffs. Maybe they'll be 1 year late on that. Rooting for these guys on Saturday. Should be a great game. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Rowdy, appreciate you joining me as always.
Absolutely, man.
Yep. See you next time.